Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we're talking about the Call of Duty. Tyler, I'm so excited you're doing this.
Answer the call.
Answer the call
of duty. Remember those ads when they played Call of Duty ads on TV?
Oh, yeah. I'm also very impressed that you decided to say to yourself, I am going to play every Call of Duty from the beginning all the way till now, because that's quite a feat.
Yeah, there are, I want to say 20 games if you include like the couple of console spinoffs too. There's like 20 games. I'm not playing like mobile games. I'm not going to play the PSP one or the PS Vita one, though maybe I will come back to them at the end. But I'm currently on a mission, and if you look at my Trello board, you'll see a lot of Call of Duty games in the on deck thing, because I've just been going through and adding Call of Duty games like a madman, and I've been playing them too. I will talk about it when we get to what you've been playing, but I finished Call of Duty 3 today. And so now I'm really excited to go back to the beginning here. This will probably end up being a bit of a series on Call of Duty. Probably 2, maybe 3 entries, I think. We'll see. I may take a break too, because I don't want to talk about it like some of the more recent ones. But they put out a game every year since 2003, so there's a lot of them. That's
so just mind blowing to me.
Yeah,
how the rate that they put out these games is, it's bananas.
It is bonkers.
But now they have 3 studios that do it, don't they?
Yeah. They rotate them between 3 studios, which means each game gets about 3 years in the oven, which is a pretty good amount of time to develop a game. Like that a game that takes 3 years to develop is not really a rushed game. I mean,
yeah, it's well preheated. Good job.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they rushed it, and maybe it's not good, but 3 years is a decent amount of time to develop a game, I think.
Yeah.
So this is our first episode on Call of Duty. And so we'll start kind of at the beginning here. I think that in video game history, there are few series more influential and prolific than the Call of Duty series. I'm not saying it's the most of either of these things, but there are not very many series that are like more influential than Call of Duty. I think maybe like the Mario series. You could probably say Pokemon, probably Grand Theft Auto. You could maybe argue has more influence, but Call of Duty is like right in there, right? From its humble roots as an alternative to the Medal of Honor series that was dominating the World War II subgenre, to its current juggernaut status as one of the premier first-person shooter games. Call of Duty, I think, is a really interesting way to snapshot not just first-person shooters or war video games, but the industry as a whole, because, like I said, since its release in 2003, the series has had an entry every single year since 2003. Which makes it that this was like one of the first series that Activision started doing that with. I mean, not sports games notwithstanding, but like I want to say like the early 2000s is when Activision started doing, they did yearly Call of Duty games. They also were doing yearly Tony Hawk games, which I guess was before Call of Duty because 1999 was the first Tony Hawk game. They did a Tony Hawk game every year from 1999 until 2007, at least one.
So you got your Undergrounds and your Project 8 or whatever.
Yep, your Downhill Jams, your Proving Grounds. American Wasteland, all those, like those were a year. Like I felt like growing up that there was more time in between those games, but there really wasn't. There was just a new one every year. I guess a year felt longer to me when I was 12 than it does now.
Hey, now it just flies by.
Yeah. But this yearly model proved to be successful for Activision, so we saw them use it across a lot of other franchises. Most notably, I'd say the Guitar Hero franchise. Remember, they were putting out like 2 or 3 games a year, and yeah, they died. The Guitar Hero series like sort of collapsed under its own weight because of that, I think. But
we got to do those.
We should do the Guitar Hero games.
We really need. That's like our own childhood in video game history, and it's so distinct. That genre is like so specific to like me being in high school.
Yeah, and they like the music that's in those games like defined a generation too. Like just thinking about when I hear a song and I go, oh yeah, that was in Guitar Hero 3, and like many of the bands that I still follow today were ones I learned about in Guitar Hero or Rock Band. Anyway, I digress.
Anytime I hear Black Magic Woman, I think of Guitar Hero.
Yeah. Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed is also another example of a game that has an entry almost every year. I think they skipped a year a few years ago, but like they basically have had a game come out almost every year.
So
there's like a bunch of they skipped a single
quitters.
year. Yeah, it was right after Syndicate, I think, because they skipped it and they were like, sorry, Syndicate was bad. I haven't played it. I don't know if it's bad or not. They're like, sorry, it's bad. We're going to take 2 years to make Origins, and it was like a completely different game. But yeah. So I think Call of Duty has been very influential across the industry from both a gameplay and meta gameplay system standpoint, as well as a publishing standpoint. So according to Wikipedia, the series is the highest grossing non-Nintendo franchise in video games. So it's been pretty successful, even though it's been developed by like several main studios at this point. I want to say Grand Theft Auto 5 is like the most, maybe it's I think Grand Theft Auto 5 is the highest grossing single piece of entertainment. But maybe the Call of Duty series as a whole, since they put a new one out every year, grosses higher. But the Call of Duty series spans a number of settings, starting with World War II in the first game, branching out in 2007 to a more modern and futuristic setting since then, with a couple of like returns to World War II. And I guess the Black Ops series does some like Vietnam era stuff, right?
Yeah, Black Ops is like Cold War Vietnam specific.
Yeah,
I haven't played
those
early times, and then it gets kind of more modern as it goes along.
I'm excited to play those. Those are the ones that I really have.
That's my favorite campaigns, I think, from any Call of Duty. Although what's funny is Ghosts is a really good Call of Duty campaign that they kind of left a cliffhanger on, and they've said they're never coming back to it.
Bummer. That one didn't do very well, did it?
It didn't. And it actually kind of, it's the beginning of the end of my Call of Duty playing with friends nightly experience is Ghosts. Still a fun game, great campaign, just completely gave up on the storyline, which is a super big bummer to me.
Oh, that's too bad. We'll get there. We'll get there one day. I think that's old enough now we could probably consider it history, right?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, who knows? Because they said they weren't doing certain things with like the old, I'm using that in quotes, old Modern Warfare. And then in the most recent Modern Warfare, they brought back characters you didn't think they were going to bring back. So they may at some point try to like cross over Ghosts into the main Modern Warfare canon. But also, how many people are playing Call of Duty for the story? Maybe just you and me.
I am. Yeah, that's true. They've mostly been multiplayer games for a lot of people. But I love the storylines of Call of Duty games. That's why I'm like excited to play them all. Because I've missed out on so many, especially like basically everything after Modern Warfare 2, I pretty much didn't play. So I'm like, pretty excited to like see what I missed over those years. So today I'm going to cover kind of the earlier World War II era stuff, basically up through Call of Duty 3. And then we'll talk about Modern Warfare in a future episode, because then we come back to World War II after Modern Warfare, and then it's all future stuff or past World War II stuff until 2017's World War II. It was just Call of Duty World War II, which was very fun.
Which is a great game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. So let's get to that first game in the series, Call of Duty. No subtitles, no nothing, just Call of Duty. Let's get to the grime facts. Call of Duty was developed by Infinity Ward and was the first game that they made after they were formed. It was released in October of 2003 for PC, May of 2004 for Mac, and then Call of Duty Classic released on the Xbox 360 in November of 2009. It was like, I think there was a bundle you could get with it and Modern Warfare 2. The best way to play it, PC, hands down. Call of Duty Classic on 360 is fine, but there really isn't any reason to not play it on PC because it runs on anything. Like you could probably play this game on like a Raspberry Pi well, you probably can't, but not because the Raspberry Pi isn't powerful enough to play it. Your PC can run this game, I promise. And if you play on PC, you get to play the expansion pack, United Offensive, which never came out on Xbox 360.
Ooh, PC exclusives.
Yeah, because there are no more PC exclusives after the first Call of Duty game. It sold 4.5 million copies by 2013, takes about 7 hours to complete, and it won a lot of Game of the Year awards, including GameSpot's Computer Game of the Year award. It won the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences 2004 Game of the Year award because it came out pretty late, 2003, I guess, October. So I guess that qualifies it for 2004 for that award. It also got Computer Game of the Year, Computer First Person Action Game of the Year, and was nominated for Outstanding Innovation in Computer Gaming, Outstanding Achievement in Original Music Composition, and Outstanding Achievement in Sound Design in the Interactive Achievement Award. So it did okay. You know, this game got some awards. It did fine. People liked it. It got a 91 on Metacritic out of 100. So there's the game's a classic, right? Did you ever play this one?
Classic. I don't think I ever played this one. I did play the original Medal of Honor.
Okay.
I never played the original Call of Duty. Call of Duty, I jumped in at 2.
Okay. The first one is, we'll talk about it, I guess. So the first one is great for its time, every other Call of Duty is better than it in every way. And it's kind of like, like the original Half-Life, where you're like, this is a great game, but future games are so much better than it that it's like, maybe you don't need to go back and play it, especially for Call of Duty, because it's this World War II storyline, But if you are doing a playthrough of every single Call of Duty game, then you will have fun playing this one.
You got to play it.
Yeah, you have to play it, and you won't have to drag yourself through it, right?
You're locked in.
Yeah. So let's talk about the development of Call of Duty. So back in the late 90s and early 2000s, Medal of Honor was pretty much the only game in town when it came to World War II first-person shooters. The first one of those came out in 1999 for the PlayStation, and then there was another one in 2000 also on the PlayStation. And they were pretty good games. And I especially remember when Allied Assault came out, because it was a PC exclusive, and all the computer game magazines were talking about it, and they loved this game, and they were using it as a benchmark for hardware, because it was based on the Quake 3 engine, so it was a little bit more of a newer version of Quake 3 to run to benchmark hardware with, so it was a really good hardware benchmark. It was hailed as a hallmark in PC gaming. It really made players feel like they were there in this war. And it is very important to talk about Medal of Honor here, because many of the key people who worked at 2015 Games, the developer who developed Medal of Honor, published by Electronic Arts, grew dissatisfied with their contracts with EA and decided to defect and form a new development house, which was partially owned by Activision at the time. Those were Jason West, Vince Zampelli, and Grant Collier? I
think it's Collier.
Collier? Is it like a...
I think it's French. I think I've seen that ending, the IER ending of a name in French. I think it's Collier.
Yeah, okay. Well, they left 2015 Games and they formed a studio called Infinity Ward, and they took a lot of people from 2015 with them. Activision gave them $1.5 million for a 30% stake in the company, $1.5 million for a 30% stake in the company, and they set out to develop Call of Duty. After the game launched, Activision just bought the rest of the company, which probably was a nice payday for the folks that worked on the first Call of Duty, I imagine. So even though the team had left 2015 because they were unhappy, they still wanted to make a World War II game. Maybe they felt restricted by EA, which is why they negotiated a lot of freedom in how Call of Duty was going to be made. That was part of the deal with Activision. They were like, okay, you can buy a stake in us, but we need creative freedom on how to make this game. And Activision was like, yeah, sure, do whatever you want, I guess. The team's goal was to make the player feel like they were a part of the war, not like some super soldier like how you felt in the Medal of Honor games. Does that accurately describe you in Medal of Honor, like a super soldier? Yeah,
you're like, if I'm trying to remember correctly, the story of Medal of Honor 1 is you're not a soldier, like a rank and file, you're like a spy, so you're doing a lot of things. It's trying to give you the excuse of why you're running solo so much, but you are like the best trained soldier of all time. You're the Master Chief of World War II, essentially.
Okay, yeah, the Master Chief of World War II. I like that. So what they wanted to do was make you feel like you were just another soldier in the games. Originally, before even all of that, they wanted the player to be like a spy type character who would sneak in and sabotage the German efforts in the war to help the Allies. But they scrapped that idea, which sounds a lot more like Medal of Honor than what Call of Duty ended up being. Then they decided to do a more traditional first-person shooter title, but tell it from the perspective of several different soldiers. That's one of the key things that Call of Duty did that was different from a lot of games at the time. This helped break the player away from just one point of view and allowed them to see the war from several different perspectives. So I don't want to turn this into like Codex history of World War II, but World War II was a pretty big war, and so there were like a lot of different armies and groups all working together to fight the Nazis, which is part of why there are so many World War II games, because there's always another army or another perspective or a group of soldiers to show, because the war was really just that big. Like showing it from different perspectives kind of also allowed some variety, I think, too, because like the Russian campaign's like usually pretty snowy, and the American campaign is whatever in the forests or things like that. And a lot of times the British campaigns are in North Africa, because that's where a lot of the British stuff happened.
Did they make a like Pacific Theater of War Call of Duty game?
I think World at War is that one.
World at War has that? Okay. Because I was thinking about, there's like a couple things that I feel like are pretty neglected in like World War II games. And like, for example, like anything in Africa is not included usually in World War II games. Yeah. Although Battlefront, not Star Wars, Battlefield 1 included like Africa and the Ottoman Empire and all that stuff, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
But that's a different series. So we got to talk about Battlefield one day. We should.
Yeah.
We really should.
We'll get there. There's a couple of Call of Duty games. Call of Duty 2 goes to North Africa, and then Finest Hour on the console also goes to
North
Africa, I think, too. So
you would only know that because you are an expert in Call of Duty now.
I am currently an expert on all Calls of Duty through 3.
I have listened in on all the Calls of Duty.
Yes, which I believe is the proper pluralization.
Yes.
Many Calls of Duty. So the team also decided to use the Quake 3 engine for Call of Duty. Now we call it the id Tech 3 engine, which was the same engine they'd used to develop Allied Assault. So the team was really familiar with how it worked already, and they were able to hit the ground running when the development started in 2002. Plus, id's engine was still like, this was the peak technology at the time. Thanks, John Carmack. It's your boy, John Carmack.
He's always there. He's always showing up. Eating pizza, drinking Diet Coke.
Yep. This also made it easy to mod the game, which is something a team really wanted to encourage. They loved mods for their games up until Modern Warfare 2 came out, and then they started to really discourage modding in favor of like keeping this pure experience, I guess.
I think that's a thing with Activision more than
I think you're right, because even up through World at War, like mods were a thing until Modern Warfare 2 came out, and then mods were never a thing again, no matter who made the Call of Duty game. So it must have been an Activision decision.
Yeah, I don't think it's really like hidden to know that when video games started becoming profitable, like the money people showed up. And cool stuff ended.
And when the marketing people are making decisions, they see mods as competition, I think, not as So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay of the first Call of Duty. Now, excuse me. I'm sure many folks listening to this are familiar with the gameplay of the Call of Duty franchise, but I'll sum it up here for the first game. It's a first-person shooter set in World War II. All your weapons are authentic World War II weapons, and the player is able to hold 2 weapons at a time. I usually like to carry some kind of bolt-action rifle for long ranges, and then some kind of assault rifle as well. The player can pick up weapons dropped by enemy and ally soldiers, which is pretty neat. The story is very linear, no open world, anything like that. It's just like, go here, kill the enemies, maybe plant a bomb on enemy weapons or supplies, and then when the mission's over, we fade to black, we start the next mission. It's pretty standard stuff for early 2000s shooters, but it was pretty high production value and included the right innovations to make it a truly like a classic game. Like, I think the first Call of Duty had like a bunch of innovations that we take for granted now. So I just want to list off a few here of what the first one did. I'm not saying this is the first game to ever do these things, but it did all of these things and it did them really well and sort of made them popular. First thing, iron sights. Games before Call of Duty didn't really have iron sights. Like sometimes you'd get a sniper rifle that had a scope on it or something.
Oh, you mean like aiming down scopes and stuff and sights?
Yeah. But games didn't really have that. I mean, I'm sure we can point to some obscure game that like nobody played that had iron sights in it. But Call of Duty really popularized this, which is interesting to me because I was watching some gameplay of Allied Assault and I was like, nope, they never looked down the scope in Allied Assault, Medal of Honor. There's a couple of sniper sections where you look down a sniper scope, but like there's no iron sights. Your squad mates are not scripted in this game. They have some AI with them and they're actually helpful. They can actually like go ahead of you and kill stuff, which is pretty nice. Usually in games, especially at this point in time, if you had any sort of ally on your side, they were garbage and they weren't good. But in Call of Duty, they were okay. The sound, super immersive sound. Like they really nailed all of the like authentic sounds for the weapons and explosions and stuff, but also just like the way everything sounds, the way the soundscape is sort of presented is like really immersive. If you can play these games on a PC with headphones, like that is a really good way to play these games, or with like a really nice surround sound system or something. And then the last thing that I think was popularized by Call of Duty is like effects that happen when grenades and other explosions happen near you. So like your ears start to ring, your vision gets blurred, stuff like that. Games didn't really do that before Call of Duty. So that's kind of cool.
That's definitely things we take for granted now for sure.
Yeah. Games that don't have these kinds of things now, like how many times have you fired up a first-person shooter, you can't aim down the sights, and it just feels weird. You're just like, oh, I just really want to look down the sights.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like early Halo too. You know, that wasn't in it, but that was kind of around this time, wasn't it? Early 2000s. That's like yeah.
And Halo never really did that. Like I still feel like they don't really. Some guns you can, but most don't, and that's okay. It's not like you don't need it, but. It definitely, like when you go from playing a Call of Duty game to a game that doesn't have that, it feels weird and feels like it should have it. So yeah,
I think that's kind of made the gameplay. Halo pistol so good because you could aim down it.
Yep. Yeah. So let's talk about the campaign for the first Call of Duty. Like I said, set in World War II, we are told the story through the point of view of 3 Allied soldiers: Private Martin, a member of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment; Sergeant Evans, and a unit from the 2nd Oxford and Bucks of the 6th Airborne Division. That's British, so I think Martin is American, Evans is British; and Private Alexei Ivanovich Voronin of the Soviet Army during the Battle of Stalingrad. I would love to be able to talk about the storylines in these campaigns, but like I said earlier, like the biggest flaw that these early Call of Duties have is that their campaigns are just small parts of an entire world war. So the events like themselves, it's hard for them to feel important in the grand scheme of things. You do some stuff, and then a lot of times the game will say, and then after that, this other stuff happened. But it's really hard for me to make the connection that like destroying these flak cannons allowed all these tanks in and allowed them to take a city or something like that. Like my brain just like can't process that for some reason, and so I just could not tell you what's happening in these earlier World War II games other than we're running through and we're shooting Nazis and we're blowing their stuff up. It gets a little bit better in later games, especially when those titles choose to focus more on the characters than the events around them. That is the thing. Like if you're going to tell stories in like a large World War setting like this, I think it's better to make the World War and the things you're doing the setting behind which like character stories are being told, right? So give me some characters with personalities and with flaws and with like, are they going to grow and change over the course of the game? That would make these a lot more interesting, which we kind of get a little bit of in some of the later World War II ones, but none of it is particularly that good. I think the storylines in Call of Duty games really start to take off right around Call of Duty 4, because then they start telling fictional stories where they're able to like really focus on the stuff that's happening. Like, yeah. So anyway, World War II is just tough. It's cool because it really happened, and like that's like that makes it cool. But it's hard to connect what you're doing in the game to how it affects the war at large, because there's so much going on in a world war that like none of these like little battles anywhere happen like have a huge impact, but together they do, right? But the campaign's super fun moment to moment. Like there's a lot of scripted events, so things will explode and like buildings will collapse and stuff. Not as much in the first one as in later ones. I really do like telling the story from different viewpoints too, which allows you to get different kinds of weapons, because the Americans use different weapons from the British, use different weapons from the Soviets, that kind of stuff. And then as you kill German soldiers, you get to pick up German weapons and use those too, which is neat.
Yeah, that viewpoints thing I didn't realize was in the first Call of Duty game. That's pretty huge, having different soldiers' viewpoints, because usually it's like all America all the time. So it's cool that they did that. And
it's kind of it's a staple of the Call of Duty series, which I think they still do today. I want to say they still do that.
Yeah, most games you flip between 2 or 3 different people, but there's definitely some games where you play almost the same person the whole time. The most recent Modern Warfare game you play as 2 different people, but they're also like together through part of it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really feel like you have that whole like 2 opposing viewpoints kind of thing.
I want to say in the most recent World War II one from a couple of years ago, you play as the same person the whole time. I could be wrong though. It's been a couple of years since I played it.
Yeah, I really want to play World at War again. But Call of Duty World War II, you mean? Yes, you do play the same person the whole time, which is weird.
Because you stay in the same squad the whole time, right?
Yeah, it's like your unit or whatever. And they're trying to like, because they want you to have like the feeling like these are your people, these are your men or whatever. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. But at the same time, I kind of missed playing as like a Soviet person or as like a British person or whatever. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, so. I really like the latest one.
The World War II one is good. It's a good game.
Yeah. But back to Call of Duty 1, I'll talk a little bit about the multiplayer, which I think much of Call of Duty's legacy is in its multiplayer. But for the first game, it's fine. The multiplayer is competent. I actually spent a lot of time playing it with friends at LAN parties because it was really well polished, and I think it required a lot of skill because at that point in time, many first-person shooters we were playing online, like there's a long time to kill, like your Unreal tournaments, stuff like that, which is fun in its own way, but Call of Duty was different because you would die in just a couple of bullets. So it was fun to play with friends on LAN at LAN parties. But much of the things that would become a staple of Call of Duty multiplayer doesn't really show up until Call of Duty 4. Like There's no like XP system where you're like gaining levels or unlocking things. It's just you got deathmatch and team deathmatch. You've got a retrieval mode where one team has to like grab an A or B objective and bring it back to their base. You've got headquarters, which is kind of like King of the Hill. Search and destroy, which is your like sort of Counter-Strike, plant the bomb and defend the bomb. And then a mode called Behind Enemy Lines, which is where most people are Axis soldiers with a few allies. And then when an Axis soldier kills one of the allied soldiers, they swap teams. And the goal is to be an allied soldier and get as many kills as possible. I guess I've never played it, but it seems kind of cool.
That's a very interesting game mode.
Yeah, seemed kind of interesting.
I wonder if it carries over.
I don't think so.
Although, you know what? That's very similar to zombies in the new Call. Not like Nazi zombies, but like it's infected is what it's called.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a lot like the infected. The infected mode is a separate take on this, but it's kind of similar.
Yeah, kind of similar idea. There were 16 maps. They were all based on classic World War II locations. I think they're all generally okay. I played a lot of the Carentan map, which would come back in Call of Duty 2, and I think it got a remake in 4, and it was also in World War II, and I think that was like the Dust or Dust 2 of Call of Duty. Like, there's just a lot of Carentan players. I bet if you load up Call of Duty now, you will find only like 4 servers, and they're all 24/7 Carentan.
Oh, yeah. It's the Office and Dust 2 of Call of Duty.
Yeah. Funny you should say Office. In an episode, I forget what the name of the episode is. There is an episode of The Office where they play Call of Duty, and there's like there's like one aside with Jim. Maybe it's not an aside, but they're like something happens, and Jim's like, "You don't snipe on Carentan. Nobody snipes on Carentan."
I forgot about that. It's so good.
Yeah, I think that's funny. But that's kind of the first game. In 2004. While Infinity Ward was hard at work on Call of Duty 2, a studio called Grey Matter developed an expansion pack for Call of Duty called United Offensive. Do you remember when expansion packs were a thing?
Oh, yeah.
They're not really exist anymore. It's just DLC really now. Yeah, I guess WoW has expansions. They still call them that. But this was like DLC before DLC. You would go to the store and buy a box. There was like, you would buy your United Offensive box, and on the box it would say, you can't play this unless you already own Call of Duty 1. And then you would take it home and install it, and it would be like a separate game almost. But they don't really do that anymore because it's all DLC, and the world's probably a better place now than it was then.
Sorry to interject with this, but can you get these on Steam? Is that where you've been playing them on? How did you get them?
Yeah, you can get them on Steam.
Cool. Okay.
They're still like $20 each, I want to say. So
Yikes.
You may be able to find a non-Steam version for cheaper, especially because I think there's no like activation. If you just buy a normal CD of it, you'll get a CD key, and as long as it lets you install it, I think you're fine.
Oh, okay.
But if you get a good deal on Steam, then that's worth.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something that would go up for Steam Summer Sale or something, maybe.
Yeah, they usually sell it as a bundle with where you get Call of Duty, United Offensive, and Call of Duty 2, and I think that usually you can see it go for like $10 or $20 altogether. Which I think is how I got it. I probably bought it many years ago when it was on sale.
That'd be worth it, though. Would be totally worth it.
Yeah. But United Offensive was released in September of 2004 and is exclusive to PC, so it's not part of Call of Duty Classic on the original Xbox, or on the Xbox 360. United Offensive is just more Call of Duty. You get 3 new campaigns, different people. They're still American, British, and Soviet soldiers. This game introduces sprinting, which would become a staple in FPS games after Call of Duty 4 in 2007 because they didn't put it in Call of Duty 2 or 3, but it was in United Offensive, which I just find that funny that they added.
Hey, Grey Matter's ahead of the game, you know?
They sure were, yeah. United Offensive added a bunch of new multiplayer maps and a few new game modes like Capture the Flag, Domination, and Base Assault. Capture the Flag that's what it is. Everybody's played Capture the Flag. Domination is like King of the Hill, but I think you try to control all the points. And then Base Assault is feels like a symmetric version of Rush from Battlefield, where teams try to destroy each other's bases by planting explosives on their like base things. Did you ever play the Rush mode in Battlefield?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, that's my favorite mode.
I thought it was really fun. It's very chaotic. I love it.
Yeah, I like it more than Conquest. It was like the main mode of Bad Company and Bad Company 2, which is why I played so much of it. And I'm sad that people seem to like Conquest more than.
Yeah, I think the sell of Conquest is that it's got like 64 people in this game, which is what makes it crazy. But Rush, I think, is a better game mode.
Yeah,
because people play the objective. Yeah, I'm one of those play the objective guys, everybody.
Me too. And Rush was so fun was because, like, we're taking a side here. It's Codex History Battlefield now. But Rush was so fun because, at least in Bad Company 2, as you destroyed the bases, if you were the attacking team, the defenders would have to fall back on the map. And so the map changed as you move through it, right? Like there are some maps that are like start all out in the open. And then as the attackers gain more ground, it like you retreat back into the forest, where it's easier for the defenders to defend and stuff like that. They generally got harder and harder as the attackers moved further in, which is really cool. And it just the game changed over the course of a game, which I thought was cool.
Did you play Battlefield 5 V, I guess is what it's called? I don't know if it's 5 or V.
A little bit, I think.
I think you played a little bit with me, actually.
What?
I think you played it a little bit with me over Xbox.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
We played on Xbox?
Yeah, they actually have, it's like a mix of Rush and Conquest where you push points and then the defending team falls back and then you keep going forward.
Oh,
it's
cool.
Pretty cool. The only problem with it is each map is different and they seem to heavily favor attackers or defenders depending on the map you play, and it's really hard to balance that. So I would play it on some maps and be like, well, I'm just going to lose, but whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's all right. So anyway, that's United Offensive. There's not a whole lot to say there other than it's more Call of Duty, and there is like a cool mission that's like different from other missions where you're flying in a plane and you have to like shoot down, I think you're shooting down other planes. I don't know, maybe I'm mixing it up with any of the other Call of Duty games I played in the past like 2 weeks. So yeah, that's United Offensive. The next game in the series is Call of Duty 2. So while United Offensive was being made, and that was like the series entry for 2004, because like, remember they put out a game every year.
Oh yeah.
So United Offensive was 2004. But during the development of United Offensive, Call of Duty 2 was being made by Infinity Ward. In fact, Microsoft actually gave them a bunch of money to secure the console rights to the game to make sure they'd have it in time for the Xbox 360's launch in 2005. And that sort of put Call of Duty on console too, which worked really well for Infinity Ward because they didn't want to be pigeonholed into as this like PC game development studio. So they were like, Microsoft wants to give us a bunch of money to make sure that we can have this on the 360 in time for the 360's launch. Perfect, because we want to put our game on console anyway. So it was like, worked out well for everybody.
You know what I just realized? That's crazy. That Call of Duty 2 came out on the Xbox 360, and we got our first Modern Warfare game on Call of Duty on Xbox 360. Still, it was all in that one console generation.
Yeah, and that Modern Warfare. Well, they were only 2 years apart because the first Modern Warfare was 2007.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like, I guess we are all the way through a whole Xbox One generation though, technically. So
yeah,
that's yeah. Wow.
This stuff is like, I remember these games as an adult, and they're now multiple generations old,
Mm-hmm. That just blows my mind because, I remember playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare on 360s and getting a 360 so I could play these games with my friends. And now I'm like, Call of Duty 2 came out on 360? What?
Yeah, Call of Duty 2 came out on 360. And then the last game to come out on 360, the last Call of Duty game I want to say was Advanced Warfare had a full campaign. That was the last Call of Duty with a full campaign. So that's like 2014, right?
Oh, Advanced Warfare was so not good.
Oh, I'm excited to play it because I know it's not good.
That's the campaign's fine.
Oh, okay.
The multiplayer was just not. They were trying to be Titanfall, and it just didn't work out very well.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do any multiplayer. But yeah,
that's
I think
because I don't know if anyone would be playing. So
this series will probably mostly focus on the campaigns of these games because I don't. It's hard to go back and play the multiplayer. Like if I wanted to go play Ghosts multiplayer right now, like there's like with 2 other people playing it, and they'd probably just rip me to shreds, right?
Well, the one thing about it too, I mean, if we were going to go over multiplayer for these games, we'd have to talk about levels because from Modern Warfare on, there are very few changes to the system of progression and leveling up in Call of Duty multiplayer that there wouldn't really be a point. Like they do some things with like Call of Duty points and Black Ops makes it a little different, but it's not that different, Yeah. So I think we're fine just doing campaign.
Cool. But anyway, yeah. Gosh, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Black Ops 3 did come out on 360, but I think it was only the multiplayer, so they didn't do the campaign for 360.
Gosh, we're old. We're so old.
I know. But back to 2005, actually 10 years before the last game, Call of Duty game would release on the 360, we got the first game that released on the 360. So in April of 2005, when it was announced that Infinity Ward was working on Call of Duty 2, the CEO, Grant Collier, said, and I quote, "Our team at Infinity Ward is committed to thrusting gamers into the heat of battle like no other, taking players on a thrill ride of adrenaline that leaves everyone gasping for air. In Call of Duty 2, we are creating the most intense and realistic action game imaginable with a stunning visual atmosphere and an advanced technology that delivers an unprecedented level of authenticity." So that's a whole lot of strong words for what they were trying to build here. And like my hot take, they did a pretty good job. I love Call of Duty 2.
Yeah, this is one I played, and I like it.
Yeah. So let's get to the grime facts. Developer, Infinity Ward. Release date, October 25 for PC, 2005 on PC. November 22nd, 2005 for Xbox 360, because it was a launch title for the 360. They weren't going to launch it a week before the hardware was out, right? But that's pretty cool. It was actually the highest selling launch title, I think. It had an 80% attach rate. Like if you bought an Xbox 360 on launch day, 80% of the time you were buying Call of Duty 2 to go with it.
That's really good numbers.
Yeah. So because of that, it sold 6 million copies by 2013, which is outselling the first one by 1.5 million, I want to say, scrolling up here, 4.5 to 6. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Average time to complete, 8.5 hours. So it's a little bit longer than the first one. That's pretty nice. I couldn't find any specific awards that it won, but they did release a Game of the Year edition on 360 in 2006. And, they wouldn't just lie about that, right? So it must have won Game of the Year somewhere.
There's no way. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, they can't just... You can't just go on the internet and tell lies.
You can't just call your game Game of the Year. There's no way.
Yeah, you have to have at least one Game of the Year. It got an 86 on Metacritic on PC and 89 on 360, probably because it was probably the best launch title on 360, and so that probably inflates its score a little bit. Call of Duty 2, I think, is where the series really starts to feel more modern. Grant Collier talked a big game, and all eyes were on Infinity Ward to deliver on those promises, and I think they totally delivered for that period in time. They improved the engine, which is still based on id Tech 3, but they made a lot of customization, and they added a few new features. I'm going to list these new features. They added a system that, I don't know if it's officially called this, but they talked about it like this. They call it the Battle Chatter system, which is when in gameplay, your squad mates will call out the locations of enemies. They'll yell out "Oh, German's on the second floor behind those sandbags," which is something I didn't notice until it was pointed out when I read a thing that they were specifically did that. And it wasn't that I didn't notice it because it's an unnoticeable thing, but it's because I just it just made sense, so much sense to me that my brain was just oh yeah, it totally makes sense, that I didn't even think about how cool of a system that is, But I definitely used it all the time, and they'd be "Oh yeah, in that window on the second floor," and I'd be "Oh sweet, look up there," and I just registered it now as I was researching for this, that this was a system that they had to add in. I'm "Oh, that's really cool." That I think worked out really well. They added some non-linear objectives in missions. So in some missions, the player is given the opportunity to tackle things in whatever order they like. Generally, it'll be blow up these 3 flak cannons, and the player can kind of choose what order they want to do it in, which is kind of neat. I found myself trying different combinations. If I was having trouble with one of those missions, I'd be well, maybe I won't go to that one first. I'll do this other one first. And sometimes that helped out. So it wasn't an open world or anything like that, but it's kind of nice to feel you have a little bit of control over what order the objectives are done in. I want to say there's probably only 3 or 4 times in the whole campaign where that's part of it, but there's nothing like that in the first game. So that was cool. Call of Duty 2 also has smoke grenades, which really helps if you're pushing an open field. You can throw a smoke grenade out there. I used them a lot on this playthrough. I don't feel I used them very much the first couple times I played this, a decade ago. Over a decade ago, 15 years ago when this game came out. Oh my gosh, we're so old, Mike.
I'm older than you, so
I know.
Just know you're the fountain of youth of this podcast.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Anyway, I use smoke grenades a lot more this time than I have in the past. And the last big thing that this game introduced that I think is maybe its greatest contribution to first-person shooters, the Call of Duty 2 specifically, is regenerating health.
Oh man, thank you, Call of Duty 2.
Yeah. Up until this game, including Call of Duty 1 and United Offensive, health was managed in any other first-person shooter game. You take some damage, you find a health pack. If you take damage, your health does not come back until you find a health pack. And if you can't find a health pack, then it's tough. But in Call of Duty 2, as you take more damage, your vision kind of starts to get harder and harder to see. It gets blurry, like your ears start to ring, and you need to like find cover. If you can get out of the line of fire and find cover and like sit, not take any damage for like 5 to 10 seconds, I don't know exactly what it is. It feels like forever, but it's probably really only a few seconds. You will fully recover, which makes you able to run right back in. I do want to say that Call of Duty 2 wasn't the first game to ever do this. I think probably Halo is probably the one that like popularized it. But
they
Call
regen shields in Halo. You wouldn't regen health, right?
Right. But in Halo 2, they didn't even have health at all.
Which is fantastic. Thank you, Halo 2.
Yeah. But Call of Duty 2 was the first like realistic shooter to do this. I think Halo felt like they could get away with it because it was, like you said, energy shields. So it was like, oh yeah, this makes sense in the story why your health regenerates, right? But it was harder to make that case for a game where you're not sci-fi. But Call of Duty 2 did it anyway, which doesn't mean that game is realistic. It's not exactly realistic to take like 5 bullets, hide for 10 seconds, and be fully healed. But you know what? Taking 5 bullets and then finding a Band-Aid on the ground isn't realistic either. So I think regenerating health is like good for game developers, because then they can assume that you're always at full health for whatever encounter you're doing, like whatever setup they have set up for you, obstacles for you to cross. They can know you're at full health when you get there, which means that they can all be really intense and frantic. Plus there's like a cool adrenaline feeling of like knowing you can only take one more bullet. And if you don't find cover, like you got to find cover and like sort of like take a deep breath, which is like, I think adds to the tension in a way that like health bars just don't. Like health bars and med packs just like sort of, I don't know, there's like a tension that gets lost, I feel.
I 100% agree with you.
I guess if you really like a slower paced game, like a health pack situation where you only have like 5 health left and can only take one more bullet and you're like playing really slow and carefully until you find a health pack, I guess some people would find that fun, but I think it's just better in Call of Duty.
All right, you ready for my random hot take? Here we go. I hate in Half-Life and Half-Life 2 that you have to go to med stations when you're wearing this super suit that takes care of you and heals you. Like, I get the energy thing, totally fine. The arc shield or whatever, that makes sense because you got to get power. But medically, it should just recharge you because you're in a hazard suit.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, my gosh.
And it's like near future. Like, they got the technology, right?
I'm telling you what I want to see in Half-Life 3 when that game comes out 85 years from now. So that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah. Valve, we need you to pick up on these innovations from 2005.
Yes, please. Please pick up on these 2005 innovations because I was going crazy playing Half-Life 1 and like getting like going to find a health station and then running to an objective and then not realizing that I was going to get hurt because that's what that game really is. It's like not knowing you're going to get hurt and then you get hurt and then you go do it again. And it's like having to run back to the health station. You're like, okay. I love Half-Life. I want that to be known by everyone. But it was the one thing that drove me crazy was that it's a super suit. Come on.
Yeah. Okay? Yeah. And it's like a diversion. Like I have this goal of like getting through this encounter and now I am sidetracked from my goal because I need to go find a med station or a med pack.
Things that make you as a player waste your time. If you're not trying to do that on purpose, looking at you, World of Warcraft, it drives me crazy.
It still drives me crazy that they try to do it. It drives me more crazy if the developer's trying to do it on purpose.
Yeah, World of Warcraft and that your dungeon run back. Come on, get it out of here. We'll talk about that more later.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, besides those innovations, Call of Duty 2 was just more Call of Duty in like a really good way. Like they took everything they learned from the first game, they applied it to the second game in a way that felt like more intense, visceral, and like really exciting. Plus the scripted sequences were just cooler this time. My biggest memory from Call of Duty 2, and I remember like where I was, like where I was sitting when I played this level. I was at the end of the first level of the Soviet campaign. You like plant a bunch of charges inside a building in a few locations. And then as you're running away, the building blows up and like collapses. And like that's like the end of the level as you get to watch this building like collapse in on itself. Was like really intense and was like, that's when I fell in love with Call of Duty and with playing games on PC. I mean, I'd been a PC gamer for a long time, but like playing games on PC, like really close to the screen with headphones on, like that is like sort of my preferred way to play a lot of games now. And it's because of that moment in Call of Duty 2.
Dude, we'll talk about it more, but I've been playing BioShock with headphones and it just makes it so much better.
Yeah, dude. So the Call of Duty 2 campaign, we're once again following a Soviet soldier, British soldier, and an American soldier. The Soviets fight to take back Stalingrad from the Germans. The British fight in North Africa. And the Americans do the exciting beach assault during D-Day, which is super intense and very fun. Like I said, I love Call of Duty 2. Also, this is the first one with a Captain Price, who is like a little bit of a recurring character throughout the Infinity Ward Call of Duty titles. He's in Call of Duty 2 with the red beret and like the crazy mustache that like goes around his face, you know? You know what I'm talking about, right, Mike?
Mission failed. We'll give him next time.
We'll give him next time, Captain Price.
Your price is so much better than mine. I got to work on my price.
But yeah, this is like the first time he shows up. And he's in Call of Duty 4. I don't know if they make an attempt to explain how how the same guy is in World War II and modern day. Maybe it's his grandkid or something. I don't know, but it's fun. Call of Duty 2 for me also felt like this, like the first next gen game. Well, now it's very old, but like at the time it was next gen, right? Our older listeners, I think, probably remember that like as new console generations appear, there's always like that one game that like you play it and you're like, oh yeah, this is a next gen game, right? Yeah. So like the lighting and the physics in Call of Duty 2 on PC were so good. And the fact that a console could now do those kinds of graphics was like, we have arrived. The Xbox 360 generation is here, and Call of Duty 2 looks awesome. It was a launch title for the 360. So good.
There's actually a thing in video games where they have launch titles that are kind of like one-off, that are there for the sake of showing off the engine. Like I'm thinking about Rise Son of Rome specifically.
Yeah.
And that might be an episode.
One-off games like didn't become a franchise.
Next gen show off games.
Yeah, launch titles that didn't.
Like launch titles, yeah.
That's a good one.
Never played Rise of Rome. I've actually heard it's not bad. It looked very good at the time, but it
was an exclusive for a while. I think it's on PC now, but it was an exclusive to the Xbox One for a while.
Yeah. I think it's on Game Pass actually.
Yeah, I think so.
I can play it now.
Yeah. Anyway, Call of Duty 2 also had multiplayer. I think it was some of the best on the 360, like immediately at the 360's launch, not counting Halo 2, which was what everybody was playing on the 360 online anyway. But like I said, it's not saying much. Like I think the other launch title was Perfect Dark that would have had like been its competition, and Perfect Dark Zero was not good. Call of Duty 2 is basically the same multiplayer from the first game though, although PC servers could support a total of 64 players at a time, which is a pretty big deal. Xbox players were limited to 8 players total, so 4 versus 4, which is, hey, them's the breaks on console. Yeah, I didn't play a lot of Call of Duty 2 multiplayer. I don't think it's too terribly notable these days. I think it was fine. I think it was just more of the first game. This was definitely a period of time where Call of Duty was all about the campaign and the multiplayer was just kind of tacked on afterthought, which is so crazy to think of now because nowadays, like multiplayer is more important to Call of Duty than even the campaign probably. But
yeah, totally. I mean, I know people that buy Call of Duty and never play the campaign.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. I mean, that was very popular in like the Modern Warfare Black Ops days. Like, I had a couple friends that were like, I never even touched the campaign. I just stripped straight to multiplayer. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a bummer because in some of those early Call of Duties, I think you would unlock multiplayer stuff in single player. So I'm like, hey, you might want to do that.
But yeah, so that's the end of Call of Duty 2 here. I think it was a really influential game at the time, but Infinity Ward's next game would echo beyond first-person shooter games. I think Infinity Ward's next game changed the face of online multiplayer forever, not just for first-person shooters, but for all online games, like basically going forward, especially nowadays. That's a story for another episode, and because we want to talk about that game like in context of the games that came after too, which we don't have enough time for today. Later Call of Duty games all sort of retain that same Call of Duty DNA, but they're very different from the World War II ones. But before I ask you what you've been playing, Mike, let's take a quick diversion into Call of Duty 3, which I feel like is often the like forgotten middle child of Call of Duty games because it came out in 2006. So between Call of Duty 2 and Call of Duty 4, well, obviously Call of Duty 3 came out then. But the cover looks exactly like Call of Duty 2. And it's like, it feels like this just sort of forgotten expansion pack almost. It was developed in about 8 months by Treyarch, which is now a very famous studio, famous for developing Call of Duty games. But this was the first numbered game that they developed. I think they did the Big Red 1, like console version of Call of Duty a year before. But Treyarch is a studio owned by Activision, and they at this point in time, they had done some of the better ports of the Tony Hawk series. They'd done Spider-Man 2, the game, which is very beloved. But while Infinity Ward was moving on from World War II to a modern warfare setting.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Treyarch took that Call of Duty technology and built an entirely new World War II game, which actually was, I'd say Call of Duty 2 technology. They didn't use the same engine. They didn't use that Quake 3 engine, I don't think. They used their own like Treyarch engine. But they took a lot of stuff that had been done for Call of Duty 2 to build this new game. We don't have to cover it in full detail here because, like I said, it's not very consequential to gaming history, but it is a Call of Duty game and it is still pretty fun. So there's a couple key differences from Call of Duty 2. Call of Duty 3 is a console exclusive. There was no PC version of this game, which is also why it was forgotten, I think, because a lot of the Call of Duty audience at this point were PC players. If you played the first Call of Duty, obviously that was PC only, right? The second one was a big PC title. It did come out on 360, but it didn't come out on PlayStation. So if you were a PC or 360 player, maybe you got to play Call of Duty 2. But yeah, so it was like a console exclusive. But very interestingly, I think it is a console exclusive, and it is also on both the original Xbox and PlayStation 2. And
whoa,
and not in like the first two Call of Duty games had console versions. I think like Finest Hour is not a console version of the first Call of Duty game. It's a completely separate game with a separate campaign that works on that generation of consoles. Same with Call of Duty 2, the big red one. It really doesn't have much to do with Call of Duty 2 at all. And it's just like its own game with its own story, it's pretty good. Maybe we'll talk about those at some point. But Call of Duty 3, they didn't do that. They just took the game and they just scaled down the graphics, and it's the same game on the Xbox version. I played a little bit of the original Xbox version, and maybe the PS2 version is like further scaled back. I should check that out. But the original Xbox version, it's just the same game with the graphics turned down. It just looks like you went into the options of like a PC game and just turned everything to low. But it's the same game otherwise. And I think the reason they did that was because at this point in time, the Wii was out and they wanted to release a Wii version. I think it was a launch title for the Wii. And because the Wii was like way less powerful than the 360 or the PS3, they sort of needed to tone everything down. And at that point, they're like, well, if we're doing this, we might as well port it to the PS2 and the Xbox, right? So they did. This one has a campaign that goes back and forth between Americans, Canadians, the Polish, and British soldiers. And what's really cool about this one, and it's maybe my favorite story of these early World War II games, is because all four of these squads are working towards the same goal of capturing a city called Chambois, and then like using that as like a conduit to get allies into Paris and liberate Paris. So all of these, the different campaigns sort of cross paths a couple of different times, but they're all working towards the same goal, which made it feel a lot more focused and a lot more compelling of a storyline. Plus they do a little bit of focus on characters. Like a lot of characters die, like people from your team that like have voice lines and are like part of the story will die as part of the story. Spoilers, which happens a little bit in some other Call of Duty games, but in this one, it's like often, which sort of drives home the like sort of this horrors of war kind of thing of like these people will just be talking to you and telling you what to do, and then all of a sudden they die, and it's just they're just dead, and it's just like there's no time to mourn, we gotta go, you know. And so I think it has that's why it's worth playing, is because I think it has the best story of these World War II ones. So yeah, that was kind of neat. And I just finished it today, so it's like still fresh in my mind. But yeah, that's my overall hot take, is like it's almost, the campaign is worth playing because it's almost as fun as Call of Duty 2's campaign, but it has a better storyline. And Treyarch is missing a little bit of like the special sauce that made Call of Duty 2 so great, I think. They didn't do the non-linear objectives thing, although there are a few spots where you can like choose between a couple different paths, which adds a little bit of replayability, I suppose. But they didn't quite, like, there's just something about it. There's nothing quite as epic as the storming the beach in Normandy as in Call of Duty 3, like from Call of Duty 2, but it's still worth playing. I think it's still good. It also has multiplayer mode, this time expanded to 24 total players on 360 and PS3, and then that's scaled down to 16 players total for PS2 and Xbox version, which is pretty cool. It's mostly the same as Call of Duty 2 multiplayer, not too remarkable. The 360 version has multiplayer achievements, which are really hard to get these days because nobody's playing, and you have to play them all in like the ranked mode. So I'm like a little bummed out by that. But yeah, and I don't know. Like, I'm fascinated by the fact that it's literally the exact same game on the older consoles. Like the PS2 and PS3 version is the same thing, just scaled down. That's so cool to me.
They just turned the graphics all the way down.
Yeah, they just turned them all the way down. The frame rate takes a bit of a dive. And like, it just, the graphics are not as good, but like I played a couple of the missions and I was like, this is exactly the same. It's just graphics turned down. That's it, which is kind of cool. So yeah, that's the first 3 games of the Call of Duty series. That, like I said earlier, I'll talk about a little bit. There were 2 other console exclusive games, Finest Hour and then the Big Red One. Those are fun. They're worth playing from like a historical perspective, which is kind of why I did it recently. But I don't think we need to go into them too deeply here. Maybe after we're done, we can do like a side games and spin-offs thing. So let me know. Send us an email. Like if you want to hear about these side-offs and spin-off games or side games, spin-off games, then maybe we can do an episode on them. Because I think they're kind of cool. They're interesting because they didn't try to take the PC version or the 360 game and like shrink them down to a smaller package like they did with Call of Duty 3. They just did whole new campaigns for these console players, which is pretty cool. So yeah. So you played a lot of Call of Duty back in your day. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I played 2, and I think I played 3. Again, it was a long time ago. I definitely played 2 because I remember the D-Day thing, and I beat 2. But I think I need to play these again now, too. This is what happens when you do a history, Tyler. It makes me want to play these games again. I wonder if it's way easier to get these games now as used 360 copies.
Yeah, I've been kind of looking around for those. That is definitely an option. Some of them, I'm trying to think. I bet you could. Yeah. I think you could.
You think so? Because I think I would want to go that route if I wanted to replay this again. I might just skip 1, honestly.
Yeah, it's fine. You can. It is on 360. It's like $20 still, I think, for the like Call of Duty Classic. That's how I played the first one, and then I played United Offensive on PC. But you can skip it. It's fine, unless you're like a World War II buff who wants to know like what battles they did or something, or how historically accurate it is. I think you can skip the first one. But 2 is definitely worth playing. 3, I think, is still worth playing, and then you know how awesome 4 is, and 4 has like a remastered version. So
yeah, 4 is pretty amazing. I have been playing. This week I've been playing kind of a mix of different games. I picked up some other ones I hadn't played in a while too. We'll start with those. So I took Warzone, since we're talking about Call of Duty, off my Xbox because that game is huge.
It's like 200 gigs, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like 100. If you have everything installed, for including Warzone, Modern Warfare, the campaign, the co-op stuff, it's over 200 gigs.
Oh my gosh!
Because Warzone alone is 100.
Oof.
So I took everything off my Xbox and I just downloaded Warzone on PC. And I have to say, Warzone on PC is a way better experience than on an OG Xbox One because it chugged along on my Xbox, barely working. And it's so much better on PC. I can't stress it. I actually played games with some friends and we won like 3 in one night, which was crazy.
Nice. It has cross-platform play, right? Crossplay?
Yeah. So everything carried over from my Xbox stuff. So I was
cool.
like, yeah, the only thing that didn't carry over is I bought Modern Warfare on Xbox and I didn't buy it on PC, but I'm not going to play it again. I beat the campaign. That's all I wanted to do. So, it was fun though. I played that. And then I also, as I said, I think earlier, I hinted at it, but I did buy BioShock for it was like $11.99 or something. It was BioShock 1, 2, both remastered versions of those, and then BioShock 3 Infinite and all the DLC. I have beaten BioShock 1 completely, loved it. Didn't play the challenge maps. That was their like DLC for BioShock 1 was these challenge maps. I just kind of skipped those because it's not story based at all. I'm in the middle of BioShock 2 right now, having fun with it. I'm going to play Minerva's Den, which is the DLC of that, because Minerva's Den is apparently like a really amazing standalone story DLC that I didn't even know existed until I bought this collection. So that's exciting to play because I only played BioShock 2, just the base game by itself when it came out. And then I'm going to move on to 3. 3 is going to take me a while.
Gosh, I love BioShock Infinite.
Yeah, BioShock Infinite, I should stop calling it 3. BioShock Infinite is so fun. And we actually got an email. Before I talk about it further, I want to read this email we got. Because Corey sent us an email. He says, "Hey guys, The subject line is 2 more holiday levels. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll go back to BioShock. Hey guys, interesting topic about holiday levels in games this week. I have 2 games that you missed that have Christmas themed levels, which is great because I want to actually. I'm going to throw this out there. If you have more holiday themed Christmas games, let us know and we can do it again next year because that would be great. We could talk about this next year. I'm all about doing that like once a year. That sounds fun. There's just not a lot of them, which is hard to find. So continuing on. Well, technically one is more of an Easter egg, which is in The Simpsons Hit and Run. If you play the game on Christmas, Homer will be dressed up as Santa on the main menu. He also dresses up for the other holidays like Easter, Thanksgiving, Halloween, etc. The other game is Bully. You play through the winter season at one point during the game, and there are multiple side missions that involve you helping a drunk homeless Santa. They're funny and fit the tone of the game surprisingly well, although I may be a bit biased since Bully is my favorite game. I gotta play Bully. That's on my list.
I've been meaning to play that since it came out on like PS2 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean that's the game that like Bully fans are calling Rockstar to make a sequel of, and it's been like up and down, like kind of in the works, kind of not in the works for a long time. So Corey goes on to say, Mike, I also played through the entire BioShock series for the second time this year, and I forgot how good Infinite was, although nothing can top playing as a Big Daddy in 2, in my opinion, and that has to be my favorite out of the trilogy. Looking forward to a future System Shock Codex, because I have never played those games myself. Hope you guys had a happy new year and looking forward to listening to you guys this year. Corey from New Hampshire. Thanks, Corey. Couple things. Very surprising that BioShock 2 is your favorite. Not saying it's wrong by any means because it's your opinion, but everything I've read about like the BioShock trilogy, 2 in a lot of people's eyes is considered the weakest. And that's because 2 was not made by Irrational, who made 1 in Infinite. So I'm happy that you like it, and I'm actually enjoying it a lot. I enjoy playing 2. Like BioShock 2, even if it's like to you the least favorite BioShock game, is still an amazing game, and it is really fun to play as a Big Daddy and have the hand drill and just go explore Rapture more. Like I'm super into it. I just thought that was a very interesting take. And Corey also brought up what I am doing next week, which is we were talking about System Shock 1 and 2, and we'll probably have a little talk about the future of System Shock, because I will not have time to play System Shock games before next week. There is absolutely no way. But I feel like if I'm going to talk about BioShock, I have to talk about System Shock first. So that's why we're doing that, because they are very much connected. Not story-wise, but much like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor are development-wise, developers. So, which I didn't know. That is the fact of the night for me, Tyler.
Oh, that Medal of Honor developers made Call of Duty?
Yeah, I had no idea. That's where it came from. Because
there's it gets better too, but just finish what you're saying.
Oh yeah, I mean that was pretty much it. I'm excited to talk about BioShock. I'm excited to talk about System Shock. I've been watching some videos on it, but I'm thrilled. I actually kind of took a break from BioShock, and I'm going to kick it up again tonight. I think I'm super excited. So nice. I've also been playing WoW with you, Tyler.
Yeah,
we've been
raiding and mythic dungeoning and doing Torghast.
Mm-hmm. Getting 200 in Shadowlands fishing. Wow, what a weird accomplishment that doesn't feel like a lot when you're done. What have you been playing, Tyler?
Well, I've been playing World of Warcraft with you. Like I said, Torghasting Mythic. We've been doing some raiding, having a lot of fun there. I'm trying to get my alt leveled up so that I want to making a lot of gold in the economy. So I want to get some enchanting, and so I can make a bunch of gold. It's gonna be great. But other than that, I've been exclusively playing Call of Duty games. So I played. Trying to think of since last week. I think I played Call of Duty 2. I played Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1, and I've just finished Call of Duty 3 today. And I'm not sure if I want to start on Call of Duty 4 immediately or if I want to like take a detour and play Jedi Fallen Order. I was thinking about doing that.
Ooh, that's hard because Jedi Fallen Order is a fun game, but Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare's like campaign is
so
still
good.
Arguably one of the best in the whole series.
I know, I agree. And I played it when the remastered version came out a few years ago. So it's been a little bit more recent, but I want to play it again before I move on to I've never played World at War. And I've only played Modern Warfare 2 once. And then after that, I haven't played any campaigns until World War II came out. And then I played World War II and I played Modern Warfare last year also.
Yeah, Black Ops is a real fun ride.
I mean,
Black
I'm
Ops.
so
And like I
excited.
said, Ghosts. Ghosts is, I really enjoyed the storyline of Ghosts, even though everyone else didn't.
Yeah. Well,
So cool. Well, choices are to be made, Tyler, but next week we'll go into System Shock. As always, if you want to email us, you can go to codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. And when I say go to it, I mean you can put that in the to section of your email. You can also find us on Twitter at mecoletta, MECOLETTA. Tyler's on Twitter at sneakerelf, ELPH. If you want to join our Discord server, you're more than welcome to. If you go to my Twitter account, at the very top pinned tweet is a invite to Discord that never expires. But you could also just email us and I will send one to you if you do not use Twitter. I understand.
but you don't have to have a Twitter account to check Mike's Twitter.
You don't have to have
You can
that.
just
If
go
you
to the
wanna
webpage.
see my lack of tweeting over the last 3 months, very intentionally so. I'm trying to get off social media because it depresses me so much. And
Yeah.
I'm feeling better about it. But that doesn't have anything to do with video games. So go ahead and email us, tweet at us. Oh, you can rate, review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You could tell your friends about us. That'd be really nice. Other than that, I think that's it for today. Thank you for the great episode, Tyler. I didn't know this much about Call of Duty. I feel like I learned a lot today.
Nice. Well,
all about learning.
that's the hope when we put these together. And I'm excited to learn a lot about System Shock next week.
Oh, it's going to get really in the weeds, you could say.
Yeah.
It gets a little crazy. So
Yeah.
with that, thank you all so much for listening. And you want to say bye to everybody?
Sure. Goodbye, everybody.